Hear me all right? There we go. I'm back. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Laidlaw. On behalf of our team, I want to welcome you to Open Circle this morning. Whether you're joining us online or in person, we're really, really glad you're here on this wonderful, beautiful, unseasonably warm October morning. So a couple of quick reminders as we get started this morning before we get rolling with our gathering. First, if you are under 12 years old, raise your hand. If you are under 12 years old, raise your hand. Okay, now put it down. Okay, now raise it again. Okay, very good. I am so glad you are in this room, and I am so glad that I get to be in this room with you. So please have fun with your families or whoever you came here with this morning. Make yourself at home. Mom and dad, caregivers, take a deep breath. Please make this space whatever you need it to be okay this morning. We welcome the movements and the noises that come with being in a room together with people of all ages. So we're really, really glad that everybody is here this morning. With that, this will be the last time I give this reminder. I've given it the past few weeks. This space is different than the last space that we used to meet in. And we haven't been meeting in any spaces together for like 18 months. So just a reminder, the last space that we were in was like one giant room, and everything was like there, and we could sort of like free-range parent or not, and mostly it was always fine. Everybody went home with the same number of kids that they came with. It was a good thing. This space is very different. There's multiple different rooms, and this is also a public space. So there's other things happening on campus right now and throughout the day. So we want to be really good neighbors, and we also do want to make sure that everybody goes home with as many kids as they came here with. So my rule for me and my family is if I'm in a room and my kids aren't in that room and they're not in childcare, then I need to go find my kids, like right away. So if you could do that to respect this space and respect one another, that would be fantastic. So, and then regarding COVID precautions and guidelines, thank you all for wearing masks in this space together. We want to be able to do this safely. We want to be able to do this without interruptions or problems, and everybody's willingness to follow those guidelines has been really, really helpful. So 2 years of age and older, we're asking everybody to wear a mask. If you forgot a mask, it's okay. We have some at the welcome table out there and at the welcome table down the hallway as well. So I think that is it for reminders for this morning. Oh, yeah, and if you get COVID like tomorrow after being here, let us know, just so we can figure out who else was in the splash zone near you and make sure that everybody's taking precautions. So, okay, this morning, we're going to begin in just a second with a brief opening practice that I will guide us through. Our friend Drew Nelson is joining us once again to offer some music. He joined us, I think, just like a month or two before the pandemic started, and it was just felt at home with Drew. So really, really glad that Drew's joining us. Lex Cummings, our curator of programs and practices for all ages, which I think is the most amazing title that exists in spiritual community world. Lex is going to be sharing our story for all ages, and then I will be continuing our Practicing With series, offering a few words on that. Sound all right? Okay. Would you tell me if it didn't? Maybe, no, okay. All right, so I'm going to get us started this morning by reading a few words from Chief Black Elk, the 19th century Sioux leader and teacher. This quote may be familiar to some of us. For me, this piece of writing was one of the works that influenced our beginnings as a community, at least my contribution to the beginnings of our community, and I think uniquely intersects with the conversation we've been having around practicing with. So I'm going to read that text, and then we're going to hold 2 minutes of silence together. That'll be marked with a ringing of a bell. So I'll read the text, ring a bell, 2 minutes of silence. I'll ring the bell again, and then we'll move on to the next portion of the gathering. And I would invite you to use that 2 minutes of space in whatever way is most helpful for you to find your footing this morning. For me, that's uncrossing my legs and arms, realizing that I haven't taken a breath in like 90 minutes. Take some deep inhales and exhales. It's okay to put your arm around the person next to you if they're okay with it. hold hands with family members, that's fine too. But I want to invite you to find whatever position in this space or wherever you are right now that communicates openness to yourself and to one another and to God. And take some deep inhales and some deep exhales. Hear these words from Black Elk. Everything an Indian does is in a circle. And that is because the power of the world always works in circles. And everything tries to be round. The sky is round, and I have heard the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind in its greatest power whirls. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. The moon does the same. And both are round. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing, and always come back again to where they once were. Thank you. The experience of music has always been a really important part of our practice together as a community at Open Circle. Sometimes we participate in music by singing together. Sometimes we participate in music together by listening. Sometimes it's a really fun and sometimes confusing combination of both. But regardless, the invitation to everyone is always the same, to participate with open hearts and with open minds. Our guest musician this morning is Drew Nelson. Drew is a storytelling songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and God-fearing feeder of birds. A fly fisherman and world traveler, he writes as a witness to the lives and journeys of those he has met along the way. Drew, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Welcoming Drew Nelson.
So how many people think that 2 minutes of silence is like the longest 2 minutes ever? Anybody else? You poor neurotypical people. I've got ADHD, man, it flies for me. It's like, just think of all kind of stuff. Sweeping the kitchen floor, put the broom off sometimes, you people. It was a joke. Come on. Now grab my notebook, hum a tune. Now write that note. Sorry, baby, I will not be home soon. Ooh. 'Cause tonight I'm going walking, oh, just me and my grandmother moon. Blocks more, Leonard to college, past the empty shell of what used to be our neighborhood hardware store. I think this town, it's not so bad, no, that's a fact. It might not have the best to give, but by God, we'll give the very best that we have. Oh, the best that we have. This city is a bride, and this river, it's a groom, and we're all being chaperoned by the silvery light of my grandmother moon. And I tell her all my secrets, and she knows all my lies. See all my good and all my bad reflected in those warm gray eyes. Smiled when I was happy and cried when I was sad, and it's certainly been wild and wonderful, this old journey from a child into a man. Oh, a child into a man. And I'm as transparent as a ghost in line to haunt some room, and I'm hoping for some comfort out of this old life and my grandmother moon. Same to her, my backyard or a foreign shore. And she saw me through the unemployment line, and one time she saw me through a war. Now our emperor, they've got their new clothes and troubles everywhere. Oh, Grandma, could you see us through just once more? And the news, it's like a car wreck, and it's so hard not to stare at how we treat each other and most everything left in our care. And this is no age of reason, it's just consume, consume, consume. Ask her, is there medicine and how to bind such wounds? The only word she whispers back is love. Oh, my grandmother moon. And I am like a young man, head first and in for a swoon, and I just want to walk and talk and hold your hand. About Grand Rapids. I wrote in the late 1900s, I think. This is the part that I really wish I was Bruce Springsteen. You know why? He's rich. No, he never has to tune his guitar, right? He just goes like this and they give him a new one. I've been doing this for about 18 years and nothing's ever happened. Ever. I keep trying though, giving it out there. Kids are like, who's Bruce Springsteen? Well, it's so nice to be back. It's been a long while, hasn't it? Boy. I can't tell if anyone's smiling or frowning, though. It's interesting that you wrote from Black Elk, because the last song, Grandmother Moon, comes from a native story that my friend Two Dogs told me about the earth and the sun, and the moon was like the grandma, she was like the chaperone. And this one definitely has a lot of native influence to it. Gonna open up the window, open up the door, let the sunlight shine on this dirty floor. Gonna wash my heart, hanging on a line, let the wind and the whippoorwill worry about the drying time. On a hallelujah morning, oh love, it takes you without warning. It's a hallelujah morning. That, and I'm 3 parts you. Oh, baby, that's a fact. And I'm semi-responsible, just a little bit wild. And I love it when you wear that dress, and I love it when you smile. On a hallelujah morning, oh love, it takes you without warning. It's a hallelujah morning. Let this river flow through me. Wash my eyes, I can't see. Big old moon to light my way, and one little star to help me navigate. Got an ancient choir to help me sing, and a medicine song. Let it ring, let it ring, let it ring, let it ring, let it ring. On a hallelujah morning, oh love, it takes you without warning. It's a hallelujah morning, hallelujah morning. Hallelujah morning, oh love takes you without warning. Hallelujah morning. That's fun. Thanks. I don't know what else to sing. I get one more. I wrote that song. It was so funny. I was married to this wonderful gal, and I wrote that song, and that first part says, going to open up the window and open up the door and let the sunlight shine on this dirty floor and wash my heart and hang it on a line and let the wind and the whippoorwill worry about the dry. I was so proud of that, and I sang it for her, and I sing with my eyes shut a lot, and then I opened my eyes, and she had a look of absolute horror on her face. I thought it was pretty good. And she said, yeah, but now the whole world will think I have dirty floors. So she never did. She was very clean. Isn't that funny? Oh, I know what I'll do. Okay, here's one. Y'all tell I didn't take my Adderall this morning? It's funner without it. so little time. Show me your heart, and I'll show you mine. Break me open. There's only one thing you'll find. So much love, so little time. There's a warm breeze from the Caribbean. Oh, it warms her way up here in Michigan. And she's talking crazy as she drifts off to sleep. Well, she does what she does just the way that I like it. So much love, so little time. Show me your heart, baby, I'll show you mine. Break me open. There's only one thing you'll find. So much love, so little time. There's a sunset, oh, with a name on it. There are children reaching for the stars. Then there's a way she drives me crazy. Just the way that I like it. So much love, there's so little time. Show me your heart, baby, I'll show you mine. Break me open. There's only one thing you'll find. So much love, so little time. I wrote a part for y'all to sing with me. It goes like this. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. There's so much love. So little time.
Thank you, Drew. At Open Circle, we share stories for all ages, stories for both the young and the young at heart. So I want to invite anybody who's young, or anybody who's young at heart, or anybody else who wants to come up to hear the story up close, to come down front and come up these stairs and join us here on stage up here. And this morning, our story will be shared by our friend Lex Cummings.
Good morning. Is everyone ready for the story? Okay, well, here it comes. So buckle up. Might make you cry a little. So, this morning's story is called You Matter by Christian Robinson. Can everyone take a big, deep breath? Get ready for this story. All right. You matter. And this book is for anyone who isn't sure if they matter. You do. The small stuff, too small to see. Those who swim with the tide, and those who don't. The first to go and the last. You matter. When everyone thinks you're a pest. When something is just out of reach. When everyone is too busy to help. You matter. If you fall down, if you have to start all over again, even if you're really gassy, you matter. Sometimes home is far away. And sometimes someone you love says goodbye. Sometimes you feel lost and alone, but you matter. Old and young, the first to go and the last. The small stuff, too small to see. You matter. Thanks for listening, everyone. Old to 5th grade. If you want to follow me and Miss Abby out this way, we're going to go have a great party.
Don't mind me, just having a little mask-related mic problem here. All right. I should probably put my glasses back on, too. There we go. There's everybody. All right. Well, here we are, week 3, back in person. Week 3 of this series that we have been calling Practicing With. I'll say that for me, I'll reiterate what I said on our first week. With sort of the craziness of everything in the world and in our lives right now, and trying to figure out what on earth it looks like to re-find our footing as a community that meets in person and has something unique and positive and generative to offer to the world right now in this moment. This topic, this series for me feels like there really isn't anything else that we could or should be talking about right now. For me, this has urgency not just for like setting the tone about who we are and what we want to be about in this next season, but has urgency for like this mission that so many of us gathered around 3 years ago, around this longing for a more loving world. That if we want a more loving world, if we want more loving lives, if we want these kids, these beautiful children that were up here for this story to experience a world with a bit more love in it than the one we're experiencing it right now, then we have to learn some new ways of being together in the world. We have to learn how to practice with. 2 weeks ago, on our first week, I started us off by reading this passage from the Apostle Paul in the New Testament, where Paul says this to some of the earliest Christians. For in him, in Christ, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. Christ is before all things, and in Christ all things hold together. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds, as shown by your evil behavior. I invited us as we looked at this passage to consider the possibility that what Paul is saying here is that regardless of what our experience has taught us, or the messages that are constantly being thrown at us every day, that the story of the universe is not a story of separateness, but a story of withness. That the foundation of all of reality is held together by Christ. That if you want to know what the most real reality is, it's relationship. You're an ecosystem, I'm an ecosystem. We are all part of the same ecosystem. Regardless of all of the ways that we divide and define and separate ourselves, which those things are real on some level and they're consequential for our lives and for our world, but it's not what reality is on its foundational level. Reality is relationship. Life is a unified whole. All things are held together in Christ. I invited us to consider that if this is true, there's two things for us to do as we get started in this experience together. One is to consider the possibility of what it might look like to change our minds. Becoming aware of the messages of separateness that are defining our lives and our world right now, and trying to figure out how to turn down the volume, and becoming aware of how our mind and our thinking and our conscious awareness is causing us to live out these stories of separateness against this foundational reality of withness, of a unified whole. The second invitation beyond changing your mind was, we're going to spend the next year or so trying to learn new practices. This idea that if everything we've ever been taught is how to live in a story of separateness, if we're going to actually try and live out a story of withness, it's going to feel like we're swimming upstream. Like the most healthy and helpful thing we could do to make sense of our lives and to try and devote our lives to a more loving world is going to feel the weirdest. It's going to feel like the strangest thing that we could do because of how strong the current is in our world going the other way. So if we want to live, and if we want to live a story of withness, regardless of the stories around us, we're going to have to learn some new practices to do that. Last week, I invited us to consider, as part of changing our minds, what it might look like to become more aware of what sort of mind or consciousness we're operating from in any given relationship or situation. We're not going to go over all of this again. It was a bit of an information dump at the end of our gathering last week. You can find it online if you're interested, or I can send you more information about it. But this idea that if we want to change our minds so that we might be able to engage new practices, we have to become aware of when we're living out of the separateness mind and when we're living out of what we called the withness mind. This morning, I want to get us started by stepping into that weirdness again, right? That if we're going to try and learn new practices to live withness lives, if we're going to try and swim upstream a bit, it's going to feel weird. So I'm going to invite us to stand up. If you can stand up, that'd be great. If you're willing and you're able. We're going to do a short circle practice together. This isn't something we've done in person together in about 18 months. And some of us in this room would be like, yes, this is why I come here. And some of us in this room are like, yes, now I know I'm never coming here again. That's fine. It's totally fine. This is optional. You are free to remain sitting down if you'd like. You can pass, even if you do participate in the circle. You can go hide in the bathroom for the next 7 or 8 minutes. It's totally fine. No judgment either way. This is purely an invitation. So we're going to practice a short what's called a short sequential circle in a minute. We're going to get in small groups. But first, I want you to consider this question, just where you are. Silently to yourself, think about the person who has had the greatest impact on you. That is the person that maybe you respect the most because of the way that they impacted your life or transformed your life. For many of us, this could be a teacher, a coach, a parent, a pastor, a guide, a therapist, neighbor, partner, mentor, aunt or uncle. For some of us, it'll be really difficult to think of a person to answer this question. For some of us, the difficulty will be narrowing it down to one. But I want you to just hold one of those people in your life, in your story, in your mind. The person who's had the greatest impact on you. And now as you consider that person, think about how you might respond to these questions. What allowed you to feel this way about this person? And what is one word or phrase that would describe what is so special about this person? What allowed you to feel this way about this person? What is one word or phrase that would describe what is special about this person? Okay, remaining flexible and stepping into a new space on a sloped floor with chairs that can't be moved. I want to invite you to get in groups of 3 or 4. Ideally, people maybe you didn't come here with, or at least mix it up a little bit. Include younger people if there's any remaining in this room. And there's just going to be 2 simple prompts. So if there's 3 of you standing in a circle, Matt will answer the first prompt, next person will answer the first prompt, next person will answer the first prompt, and then we'll all have a turn with the second prompt, okay? And if you've been a part of a circle before, you're familiar with this. If you haven't, it's okay. There's just 5 intentions to enter into this space with one another. When it's your turn to speak, speak from the heart. When someone else is speaking, listen from the heart. Without saying too much, say just enough. Respect one another. We don't have a talking piece this morning. And trust the process. So, if you don't want to participate, you can sit down, and that's okay. If you do want to participate, now would be like the fun and slightly middle schoolish awkward part to find 2 or 3 other people to join up with for a second, okay? When you found your people, look at me so that I know you're ready. Okay. Yeah. If you need a group of 5, it's okay. If you need a group of 2, it's okay. Okay, look at me if you got a group. Okay, everybody who wants a group has a group. Okay, with these 5 intentions, here are your 2 prompts. Share your name and offer a word or phrase that describes how you're feeling this morning. And then, after that, everybody has a chance to respond to that prompt. What is one word or phrase that would describe what is special about the person you just thought of? You don't have to share the name of that person or a story about that person. Just a word or a phrase that describes that person that you considered in response to the question that I just offered. And we'll do this long enough to make sure we actually have time to do it. I'll give you 6 or 7 minutes. When you're finished, once everybody's had a chance to respond to both prompts, if you want to find your seat, then we'll know that we're ready to move on together. Okay? All right. Ready, set, circles. All right. How we doing? Okay. How did that feel? Good? Anybody? Well, I guess it'd be weird to say that was not good to around the people that you were with. Okay. I will say that my experience of this room now, as opposed to like 6 minutes ago, is like, it's just like this like different sense of ease. So I don't know if you experienced like a lack of ease entering into it, which is natural for a lot of us when somebody asks us to talk to people that we don't know or don't know very well. But on the other side of this, from up here, it feels like sort of a wave of calmness has rushed over this room. So just an observation. Thanks for being willing to give yourself to that practice. We'll come back to it in just a minute. What we tried to practice together, what we just experienced together, while it may be a new or newer practice for some of us, it's actually not new. It's actually, like what we just did, is one of the oldest practices that has existed in the history of humanity. We're talking about practicing with and trying to figure out how to live lives of withness when everything around us is screaming and teaching separateness. But what's true is that though we maybe don't experience it in the ways that societies and cultures once had, there was a time among cultures and societies where withness was the reality. And I don't want to idealize or appropriate indigenous culture or ancient culture in any way, because I know that my social location is separate from that, and I know that every culture, every tradition at any time was not perfect. So I'm definitely not trying to say, if we could just go back and be like those people back then everything would be fine, because I don't know if anything was ever fine. But what I do want to say is that we have lost something in our world today, and in our lives today, that was present previously. That practicing withness was once reality, where for so many of us right now, it feels like separateness is reality. Evidence of that in a real simple way is what we just did, practicing a circle. For centuries, in indigenous cultures around the world, the shape of relationships and the shape of community looked like something we just experienced together. It looked like a circle. It looked like a council having a conversation. It looked like a family facing each other and seeing each other's eyes, rather than everybody's eyes facing the same screen or their own screens on their laps. It looked like people gathering around a fire. And I don't know who wrote down Christian scripture, the texts, the stories. I know there's traditions and all sorts of critical research around that. Moses, Ezra, all these different contributors. Fine, whatever. Those are all really important conversations. But I would bet you everything that I have, that everything that we call sacred text, before it was ever written down, were stories told in circles around fires for generations. Stories of where we came from and where we're going and what matters and who we are and what we believe and what the mysteries and meanings of life actually are took place in a circle, took place around a fire, generations together sharing those meaningful moments together. I think that there's something about that shape, whether you want to call it a human instinct or an archetypal energy, whatever. When we get in that shape, as resistant as we might be to it, to entering into it, there's something in us that unlocks that says, wait a minute, this is how everything is supposed to be. This is how every relationship is supposed to feel. I think that's in part why this room felt different at the end of us doing a very simple triad exercise in response to two simple prompts, felt different than it did in the minutes right before that. I think it's because something about that shape taps into the most primitive, instinctual, archetypal aspect of what it means to be a human being. If that was part of what it meant to be human, and now it's something that we may have lost, then the question is, it could be, how do we get that back, or how do we make sense of that in our time right now? The fascinating thing to me is that over the past 50 years or so, researchers from around the world have been trying to understand when people knew how to have actual community and witness with one another. There we go again, witness with, right? Last week, I said with like 7 times in a row in a sentence, and it got really gross. I'm going to try not to do it again today, but I just did a little bit. When people practiced witness with each other and had community, and when they knew how to resolve problems and repair harm when it had occurred as a community in a witness sort of way, how did they do that? And what did that actually look like? And the research around this didn't just sort of research it and say, well, now we know what they did back then. These researchers looked at history and anthropology and archaeology and sociology, and also where is that still happening in today's world so that we can understand it, and not just understand it and honor it, but so that we can understand it and actually try to understand what works, why it works, and how we can actually try and put that into practice in our own lives. And what emerged out of all of this research is something called restorative practices. Raise your hand if you've heard of restorative practices. A few of us. Beautiful. So for some of this will be a bit of review. For some of us, it'll be an opportunity to take a step into what I think is some really fascinating waters. I think for all of us, this is an opportunity to sort of take a next step in what my teacher called our restorative journey, or for the sake of this series, our witness journey together. So if you have pencil, pen, paper, journal, whatever, I think I threw something on Facebook saying you might want to bring that this week. This is the part where maybe drawing, recording, sketching some things would become really helpful. The restorative practices movement is sort of like if a group of scientists got in a room and said, let's design the most interesting thing that Matt Laidlaw could ever conceive of in a laboratory, and then give it to him and see what happens. Because when I found this, it was like everything that energizes me combined into one field of science. Mysticism, history, anthropology, religion, social science of relationships and spirituality, all of it, in a bottle, shaken up, here you go. It's for me, sort of peak fascination around some of this. And even though we're talking about it now, 3 years into our journey, we're talking about it explicitly now, this stuff really helped shape the foundation of when and how and why we got started together as a community. So this science of restorative practices emerged around this research, and the way that RP defines itself, I'll give a little bit of a definition here and then a hypothesis in a second, is it's an evidence-based approach to building community and resolving conflict. And again, I'll say there's a lot of evidence-based stuff out there in the world, and it's great. What's fascinating to me about this is that the practice came before the theory. People were doing this already. Nobody invented this. The science just researched who's doing it, why does it work, how does it work, and how can more of us do it, because we need a bit more witness in our world. So again, mysticism, history, anthropology, spirituality, wow. And also really good evidence-based science and research to give us some practical tools around why and how it works and how we can put it into practice. The fundamental hypothesis of this theory. The fundamental hypothesis of restorative practices is that human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when people do things with them rather than to them or for them. Human beings are happier, more cooperative and productive, and more likely to make positive changes in their behavior when people do things with them rather than to them or for them. Okay, so you got your piece of paper. Because I don't remember math, which axis is this? This is the y-axis. So y-axis, if you want to think about that as control, limit setting, or discipline, or I struggle with the word discipline in this framework. I understand why it's there, but you could also add accountability, pressure, boundaries, expectations, anything around what control might look like in a relationship. Control, limit setting, discipline, accountability, pressure, boundaries, expectations. And for the sake of this little chart we're going to look at, the higher up on the y-axis means the higher amount of control. Okay, so follow the little arrow up there. This is higher limit setting or pressure than right here. Okay, so if that's the y-axis, this is the x-axis, right? So if you want to think about the x-axis, the horizontal axis indicates support, encouragement, nurture, love, warmth, anything around sort of like, for me, like warmth is the word that captures it. Encouragement, nurture, support, warmth. The higher you go towards the right means more of that. So control, limit setting, discipline, expectations on the y-axis on the left, support, encouragement, nurture, love, warmth on the horizontal axis. So if you're in a relationship or in an environment where there is low control and expectations and a low level of support, encouragement, and nurture, that is what is considered a neglectful environment or a neglectful relationship. This is when you're in a situation and you notice that the person you're talking with, working with, caring for, is caring for you, whatever, they're just checked out. They're just not there. Or you're just checked out. You're just not there. A neglectful situation or environment can happen for a lot of reasons. You might just be tired. Something awful might have happened to you. Something awful might have happened to somebody else that created a scenario where there is low expectation, low pressure, low limit setting, low discipline, and low love, low encouragement, low nurture, and low support. We'd call that a not relationship or a not environment or a neglectful relationship or environment. Now, if you're in a situation where there is high expectation, control, limit setting, discipline, but also still a low level of encouragement, support, and nurture, we would call that a punitive environment. We would call that a to environment. This for me is like glasses down on the nose, I'm looking over the glasses with angry eyes, and I'm pointing at you, and I'm doing something to you, or I'm saying something to you. I have high expectations, I have high control, very little support, love, and warmth is being offered. That is a to environment or a punitive environment. Something's being done to me, or I am doing something to you. The image of this is sort of like stereotypical dad, or like, remember The Wonder Years, the show The Wonder Years? Like not the new one that just came out. I haven't watched that yet. I don't even know if it came out yet, but like Kevin Arnold. She's seen The Wonder Years? Anybody? A few of us? Okay. The dad in The Wonder Years is like the classic example of like the angry dad, right? Or the angry parent figure. The football coach that maybe is in it for his own ego and not for the care and support of students or those that he coaches. Often, a dean of students is like the example of what this person looks like. But this is any situation, any environment, any relationship where expectations and control and discipline and pressure are through the roof. Warmth, love, encouragement, nurture, and support are low. This can happen for any number of reasons. Often, on a basic level, when people feel really stressed out, they become more punitive. That's like a really natural thing. I'm really stressed out, so I'm going to start shouting orders to everybody. What am I doing? I'm doing things to people, which is fundamentally different than being neglectful or not being a part of the relationship or the situation because I am offering low control and low support. Third, bottom right. Low expectations, control, pressure, limit setting, boundaries, but high nurture, warmth, support, encouragement, love. That's what we call a permissive space or a permissive environment. This is when we do things for people. For me, like the classic example of this is like helicopter parents. So like A big part of my life I spent working with high school and college age students. Something really strange sort of changed right around 10 years ago, and what I noticed around the time that kids graduated from high school, and that I was finding out that colleges were designing entire parts of their orientation for new students starting school to figure out how to get the parents to leave. Because like mom and dad were just planning on moving in with the kid. And what? Doing everything for them. With great like motivation, warmth, love, encouragement, nurture, wanting to make sure that everything was okay, but also maybe not setting very high expectations for what this 18-year-old was capable of in that stage of life. Or maybe that parent needed to remain permissive because they'd been permissive for all of the time that they had been raising this child, and now the child wasn't capable of stepping into that space on their own in a way where they could care for themselves, so the parents felt the need to be permissive and do things for them in that space. Before we go any further, I want to say this is not meant to judge or shame any of us. This is another tool for awareness around our actions and how we exist in relationship with one another, so that we can figure out what it might look like to actually engage ourselves and one another and the world in a way that allows us to practice with. This last one, not for, high control, limit setting, discipline, boundaries, expectations, high support, encouragement, nurture, love, and warmth. That's what we call a restorative space. Or that's what we call a with space. This is like the sweet spot of relationships and how we organize our lives, according to the research that's been done around this. Because throughout history, in these cultures and in these times and spaces where it seemed like people intuitively knew how to be with one another and solve problems when they came up, it's because something like high expectations for everyone in the community existed, but also everyone in the community had everything they needed from one another to meet those expectations. High love, high warmth, but also high boundaries, high pressure, high expectations, and somehow those two things merge into what is called a with relationship, or a with space, or a restorative or transformative way of being in the world. Now, if we had more time this morning, we could circle back to everything we talked about the past couple of weeks, because this science reinforces what we've been talking about. What's the goal of the spiritual life? Union. To be connected, to feel that connection. And people have figured it out throughout history, and now we know how they figured it out, and we can begin to try and figure out what it might look like to put that into practice in our own lives. If we were going to do the propositions about prepositions teaching series that we talked about last week, the with week would be on this is the most important word in sacred scripture. If we could pick one word in all of the Christian tradition, if I could pick one word, I'll just speak for myself. I think the one we have to keep is the word with. It's the whole story. It's where the story starts. It's where the story is headed. It's what reality actually is on every level, and it is what our invitation is to experience. Now, this, I know, feels like super workshop-y. Plenty of room to ask questions around all of this. But my invitation this morning is simply for you to consider this as a tool. Consider this as a way, if this invitation into witness is at all compelling or interesting to you, or if you're just sick of the separateness, life, and messaging and world, I invite you to just take this into consideration and play with it. Because every environment you find yourself in, every relationship in your life, just about any circumstance I think we could imagine, can in some way exist with this tool, and in some way we can make sense of it. It can bring some awareness to how we are actually operating in the world and in our relationships. So, just for reflection, we're not going to get in circles. We're not going to ask you to shout anything out loud here. But just like any tool, if it's taught with any amount of wisdom, like this is just a tool and it's not concrete. And it's especially not helpful to like start putting people in buckets and labeling them. I knew it. I knew that person was a punitive person. That's why I hate them so much and why I don't want to talk to them anymore. Okay, well, guess what? Now you are the punitive person in this conversation, right? So it can bring awareness. It shouldn't bring judgment of yourself or with others. And what's also true is we can exist in all of these spaces in different relationships. So you might be very permissive when it comes to your children or your family, but you might be very punitive when it comes to your coworkers. You might have experienced a neglectful childhood. You might be neglectful to your family members, but you might be with your friends. You might be the most restorative person with people who are outside of your family. At any time or moment of the day, you can move around all of this because of external pressures or stresses or changing circumstances. So I'm just going to ask a couple questions, and I want you to think to yourself where you might reside in this social discipline window based on the question that I ask. So, when you are feeling stress, you yourself are feeling stress, do you become more punitive? Do you become more neglectful? Do you become more permissive? Do you become more restorative? When you're feeling sympathy for somebody else, do you become more punitive, neglectful, permissive, or restorative? When you feel like you're not being heard, you are trying to communicate, and whoever you're with just can't hear you. Do you feel like you become more punitive, neglectful, permissive, or restorative? When and if you're about to leave for a vacation or a trip of some kind, do you become more punitive, neglectful, permissive, or restorative? You might say it depends on if we're talking about work or home, because somebody's got to pack that suitcase, right? I just tipped my hand. Probably become more punitive when we're in vacation packing mode. Where do you go on the social discipline window when you're coming back from vacation? Like first day back at home, first day back at the office. Punitive, neglectful, permissive, restorative. All right. A couple things before we close. Again, this is not a new idea. This is a new way of organizing it, but people have been doing this for centuries. And the people that you have respected the most in your life, the person you thought of in response to that first question I offered, is probably really likely somebody who is existing in your life in that with space. They held you accountable, they had expectations, but they offered love, they offered support, they offered warmth. We've been transformed by this already. Many of us are already practicing this already in our lives, with our kids, with our roommates, with our coworkers. This just gives us the opportunity to be more explicit about it and how we are practicing it in our lives. This is essentially an invitation to figure out how to do this on purpose all the time, as often as we can. One of my teachers, I may have mentioned this already a few minutes ago, I don't remember, said we're all on a restorative journey. Like, this is the journey of our whole lives. This was sort of a like scientific way or a social science way of saying that the goal of the spiritual life is union. What he said was, like, our whole lives are a restorative journey, whether we recognize it or not. We're all moving towards with, whether we recognize it or not, because that's how it started and that's how it's going to end, and that's what's true right now, whether we realize it or not. So we might as well do what we can to be as intentional as possible to cooperate with that journey of witness, and this is one simple way of doing it. So this is like the foundation for the practices we're going to keep talking about in the next couple of weeks or months. These first 3 weeks, a lot of information, a lot of big ideas, because this is like the container. This is the container for all of it. So when we talk about compassion, when we talk about empathy, when we talk about curiosity, when we talk about equity, when we talk about love, when we talk about belonging, this is going to be the container to hold all of those things together in the conversations we're going to keep having. So where do we go from here? We're off next week. There's no gathering. We're back on the 31st, or we're back on the 24th, and then we're off again on the 31st. That has to do with the availability of this space. So it's a little bit wonky, but and then we're on 3 weeks in a row in November. So 24th of October, when we're back, it's going to look a little bit different. In a month, we're going to come back to this, and we're going to keep going with these practices. So my invitation to you in the next month, if this is at all interesting or compelling to you, is to take this, print it, draw it, sketch it, put it on your desk, put it in your room, put it on the refrigerator, think about it, play with it, and ask questions about the relationships and actions in your life in a really basic, curious, playful way. What relationships and actions in your life feel neglectful? What relationships and actions in your life feel punitive? What relationships and actions in your life feel permissive? And what relationships and actions in your life feel restorative? You can try and make changes and fix it all if you want. That's great. My invitation is simply into playing with it and trying to become more aware. All right, if you're willing and able, please stand with me. A couple of quick announcements before we go. Everything we're doing takes work, and we continue to be grateful for everybody who's willing to help, especially coming back from being off from meeting in person because of COVID for so long. We know it's going to take a while to figure out who we are and how to do it, and we're in a new space and what all of that means. So thank you to everybody who's been willing to help. We do need more volunteers each week. You can check that out at opencirclecommunity.org/volunteer. You can see the jobs, you can see the details, you can see the dates, you can sign yourself up. It's super easy. You're not signing up for the rest of your life. Just one time when you sign up. It's super simple. Everything we're doing also costs money. So we continue to be grateful for everyone who has given so generously to this community in this past season. If you want to help make gatherings like this happen and continue to happen into the future, you can make a donation at opencirclecommunity.org/give, and there's a little cash box on the welcome table as well in the exhibit hall, if that's helpful. On this Thursday, October 14th, I need to make sure I get this title right because I think it's great, and I know I'm going to say it wrong. Parenting in a Post-Traditional Christian Space. Lex, who shared our story for all ages this morning, she's just hosting a conversation at Roots Brew Shop on Thursday at 7 p.m. She's going to have some prompts, some questions, some ideas, but the conversation will be determined by who shows up. So if you want to have a conversation around that topic with others in this community, I think it's a really simple way to get to know each other a little bit more, and B, talk about probably some of the things that we're all wrestling with during this time. So that's this Thursday at 7 p.m. You don't need to RSVP. Just show up. If you'd like to share a story for all ages sometime on a Sunday morning, either because you love kids or you've got one story that needs to be shared because you're all excited about it, whatever, let me know. We'd love more people to share stories on Sunday morning. Remember, no gathering next Sunday, the 17th. We're back on the 24th. Tim Sayers will be offering music, and Fable the Poet is joining us as our guest teacher, and it's going to be fantastic. treats in the exhibit hall. Make sure you pick up your kids first. And if in 15 or 20 minutes or so you're willing to help clean up, that would be much appreciated. Andrea will be wearing a shiny yellow construction vest. So if you haven't met Andrea yet, that's how you know who Andrea is. You can introduce yourself, and also she would be glad to boss you around if you want to help clean up, okay? So look for the person in the shiny vest. Okay. You want to put your hands open in front of you. Receive these words of blessing and benediction as we go. My Open Circle family, this week, may we all know what is real. May we believe that neither life nor death, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of the universe will ever be able to separate us from the love of God. And may we all have peace. Peace be with you, my friends. Have a great week.